are live. Welcome everybody to the Richard Listen Show, and thank you for tuning in 7 p.m. Pacific. If you haven't shared already, blast it to your friends, and if not, after the show, send them the link. We appreciate your support, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Today, in studio, we will be... We've had real estate experts, we've had yoga experts, but today we will be speaking to someone who's in the field like my own. Perhaps we've shared a similar journey. We have a clinical and forensic psychologist, but I've just also recently learned has also worn the hat of team mom. So we'll be digging, and we'll be curious to see, break the ratio down of which we get into further. But today we'll be covering topics that are familiar to youth sports and really youth development, including concussions, sports, competition, and influences on mental health. And we're open to your questions, so please write in the comments, questions. We will try and get to them throughout the show, and if not, throughout the week. That we are here to be a resource to you and for you, and that is the purpose of being here. So it is going to be an exciting month upcoming. We have writers, we have the dentist for the Brooklyn Nets, no longer New Jersey Nets. I'm dating myself. As well as jazz musicians. So thank you all for suggesting areas where you want to see high performers, and all the people who are reaching out and maintaining contact to us. We will get you a date. We will get you scheduled here at All Access. And again, we are humbled and thankful. So before I introduce my guest, who's anxiously awaiting after we're giving her a minute to cool off from her drive, the last 2 weeks have been exciting for me. It's been baseball, and then more soccer, just because you asked. So all the way from the Dodgers to Anaheim Angels, out to the Angels single A ballpark in San Manuel. And if you have not been to a single A baseball game, I recommend it. If you're out in Rancho Cucamonga for the Quakes, for the Dodgers, wearing my Dodger blue, it is fan-friendly, kid-friendly. Kids are playing handball, 50-cent hot dogs if that's your thing. And it is a blast. So we're always about discovering new parts of California and new adventures. So check it out. The manager, the players were real humble and amazing, and I even got to meet an all-time great in Charlie Huff, the knuckleballer. So that was a kid-like excitement moment for me, and special shout out to the EAP for the Dodgers, Melissa Lambert, for her invitation. So, without further ado, our guest today is a clinical and forensic psychologist. Yes. And she's also she's going to do more of the introduction about what she's comfortable telling us about her work history. So also worked on re-entry from the prison system. Is that correct?
From the jail system.
From the jail
yes.
system. Thank you. So without further ado, I want to give a warm welcome to Dr. Rolinda Shaw.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you.
I'm excited
Thank you
to be
for
here.
being here. Thank you. So, what can you tell us about where you've come from, where you're working now,
Okay.
and I'll pick your brain wherever you start. So
Fantastic. Well, I've been working in the field of mental health for about the last 20 years. When I started my career, I was working with children and adults with developmental disabilities and guiding families through the educational system, like the IEP process, and working with various agencies like regional centers and child protective services to make sure that medically fragile children had, durable medical equipment and such. So I was an advocate, a huge advocate for that special population. And then about 10 years ago, my interest kind of changed a little bit, and I went dove more into the mental health field and started working in corrections, which has always been my passion. So for the last 10 years, I've been in and out of the county jail as many roles, but most lately downtown, the Twin Towers, working with mental health inmates with severe mental health issues. So a lot of release planning. I've done groups in the pods and, help to rebuild their ADLs and teach them, educate them about their mental health and their available resources out in the community, trying to promote stability so that they knew that they had options. And so right now I'm on the other end of once an inmate gets released into the community, and I'm working with a specific population of those that have been defined mentally incompetent by the court system to help them find specialty housing. So in lieu of finishing their jail terms inside the jail or within, sentenced to prison or state hospitals, they're actually put in the community and receive a court-ordered mental treatment health there.
Yeah, coming from, I have worked for Gateways Hospital and forensic
excellent.
outpatient. So I worked more with the not guilty by reason of insanity. And
awesome.
Speaking of humility, I mean, initially in taking that work, and I always tell the story of how I got the job because it was like, I think I sent like the worst resume possible, So for all you out there who are trying not to get a job, I sent my like unedited
Nice.
Microsoft Word job. And sure enough, I didn't get a response for a month, and I was so excited. And I always tell people but the supervisor came back after a month, and he said, this is Dr. Marana. I've been on vacation in Africa.
Excellent.
And I've heard a lot about you, so he brought me in. So, but it was really interesting how you step in a forensic environment, and similar to what a lot of our listeners just watch, the shows on at 9 p.m. about that,
Yes.
you hear on all the law shows, not guilty by reason of insanity.
I still do too.
Yeah. And exactly. And you're like, what is that? And who gets that? But it's really humbling because the fear initially of, and when you do read the police rap sheets and you read the criminal reports, it is heartbreaking what people in moments of mental illness or in combination dual diagnosis
Yes.
or under situations where they were being abused or had been under almost forcible imprisonment by a spouse.
Absolutely.
What people do, and it is a little bit saddening. But when you get around the environment, you also get an exposure to humanity. That's very different. That's very
true.
different.
A lot of the dark side of humanity, and trying to find the commonalities that you share with people so that you can help them and be supportive and not be judgmental, because it's not our role.
Right. And the thing is, I experienced, I don't know about for you, and I'm sure there's studies out there about people who are court mandated or have to go to therapy. Mm-hmm. Some of them benefit more because in a way, after the initial resistance, they're like, well,
Yes.
I'm getting all this therapy, and I'm sure in the
Right.
prison and the jail, you're doing a lot of dialectical behavioral therapy, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So you want to tell people about that program, because that's had a lot of reduction of suicidal or violent kind of tendencies, right?
Right. Well, a lot of people don't know, and I share this just because they don't know, but traditionally when they think of the jail system, they just think of, men and women who have broken the law. But what they don't realize is that Twin Towers, which houses over 2,000 people in each tower, is now predominantly only mental health housing. And what that means is that there's a large percentage of the jail population and in general population that is taking medication that needs to be monitored very closely. And although the jail is not the ideal setting for any type of therapy or rehabilitation or treatment, just by the defines of the physicalness of the environment, it's really been a shift towards rehabilitation, towards CBT, the DBT types of trainings, because they find those are the most, effective with people with a long history of a long history within the criminal system. But the DOJ came in and actually set
so
in
funny.
programming.
I can tell you're using all the acronyms.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
the Department of Justice. I apologize. I apologize.
For me, I'm like, ACT, CBT,
right.
DBT, PTSD, right?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Thank you.
I apologize.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Yeah, I mean, just in case some of our listeners are like, what are they talking about?
Different modalities of
what
therapy.
Is a DBT, right? A lot of people ask me that, even though it's been around now 30 years, right? It's become. So can you explain a little bit? I mean, how does that show, like, what does it help people with? Because I always find that it's got proven efficacy with people with a lot of trauma.
Right, and it's a dialectical behavior therapy. And basically what it helps people understand is how their thoughts impact their behaviors, and their behavior or their choices, and their choices impact their behaviors. So basically, DBT is a model that's designed to not focus on so much specifically all of the trauma that a person has experienced, but allows them to recognize that there has been trauma, but this is how I'm reacting to it, and this is how it's impacting my life. So the ideal situation would be for someone to get that type of therapy and then have individual sessions so that they could process, like you said, the trauma. And that's why I say that the jail isn't the ideal place for that, because there's just not enough mental health workers, for the population. It's over 20,000 inmates, and that's just in Twin Towers and Men's Central Jail. So,
which raises a bigger question about getting healthy in unhealthy environments, and how's that really possible? But let's do a quick aside to your to keep your own sanity, right? That's what we're always interested. People always ask, right?
Yes,
psychologists. How do you not get absorbed by your environment? How do you not become right what you see and what you experience, which a lot of us do at different times or another. It's a natural consequence of being empathetic.
Absolutely.
How have you, managed and balanced, and how did, our common thread of sports and team mom, how did you get that role? And
that was a perfect segue. Absolutely. It's really funny because in school, professors stress self-care, and in any work environment where you're dealing with mental health, self-care. And I love that it's broadened now to like all professions, and people throw around the term and, I'm taking a spa day, or I'm taking a mental health day. And I love all of that. But I think that honestly, each person's self-care is different. For mine, it has definitely been sports. In my home, my daughter and my son, and now my granddaughter, we are a house divided because we all have different NFL teams that we support. So football season in our house is very tense. We have a Falcon fan, an Eagle fan, and a Saint fan. Well, a former Saint fan. I'm slowly trying to get everybody to get on the Eagles bandwagon. But I'm that person.
Well, you can wear. I should have known by the colors we're wearing here. What was happening. Coincidentally. But yes, actually, sports has been a huge part of my mental health and coping. I enjoy watching it. I love going to games. I love when my children are older now. They're in their mid-20s. And so when they were younger, I was all about, the softball games, the packing up the car, picking up the kids, got to do the homework, got to get them to practice, all of that balancing, still got to get dinner and all that fun stuff and bath time, and you'll miss it. I promise you. Is there a spreadsheet for that or an app for this? I mean.
I wish. I think you just do it, right? Wouldn't you say?
I don't know. I think there needs to be. It's so funny. I feel like the weekends for parents who are committed, and I have clients that are youth basketball players, youth tennis players, all these different sports, baseball, golf tournaments. You get the scent. People are, and the better you get and the older you get, the further away the fields. I always tell people my son is I went out to see the Quakes out in San Manuel Stadium, and the players asked me, do you come out here much? And I was like, yeah, actually, I'm out here all the time for soccer.
Nice.
And they were like, yeah, I drove by. All the baseball players were noticing all the fields. So, yeah, the further away the fields get.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a real task unfortunately, for people where they become a service to their kids and then forget some of themselves. I have some concerns out there that people then ignore their health or a tendency to, be eating fast food, and so keep doing the things that are healthy but still maintaining a balance is part of my objective, and my back tends to remind me when I'm not taking time to, why can't we enjoy a picnic at the soccer field, or what's the hurry?
Nice.
Lancaster, we had the spring bloom, don't be in such a hurry.
Right. It is really hard when you're in the middle of things to forget to be present and take time to really enjoy. I never had a picnic on the grass, and now I'm kind of sad during my daughter's 8 to 3 o'clock softball tournaments, or then they start playing competitively, and there's travel ball and all that kind of fun stuff. Your eyes just got so big.
Yeah.
Because I know you understand. But it's really is important. And I think that my saving grace is not only did my daughter and my son generally love sports, but I found comfort in building friendships with the parents who were also there every weekend. It becomes a family, so you kind of share the burden, because there's no way that you can be 100% present in coordinating all of that stuff for your child and still working full time. And there's lots of single parents out there, so we really relied on the village to help out. Sometimes one of us would pick up, sometimes another one would drop off. And that's just how, we made it a point to, when we weren't in season, to still get together and celebrate being together and, supporting each other. And I think, that's the closest to a spreadsheet I ever got. I'm not that organized. But now that you say it, maybe I'll try.
Well, that's right. Thank you. You're making me teary, Dr. Shaw. So, that's the beauty, right? We would like technology, and it does seem like every club team now has an app to organize schedules, practices, communication, which helps. But you're right. Nothing replaces the human element. And one thing I always speak to parents about when they're choosing, nowadays, choosing a club team, it's like free agency at 15 years old. What is the environment you want to be around?
Yes.
And do other parents greet you? Is there that, can you even ask someone for a ride? Is there that safety where you would want the kids to be hanging out?
Absolutely.
And for me, it's been one of the greatest. I know we're getting bullying and things that the public school system offers, but it's been the greatest exposure to different kinds of kids.
Right.
And of course, as they get older, there's kids showing up, sometimes under the influence or from all kinds of home environments. So I think it is a great education about the different things that people are going through and battling, and how sports can be this tremendous resource.
Absolutely. And I have found that even when my children stop playing sports, they still maintain those friendships. So, especially when children get older and they get to that high school age where things become very cliquish, even if they started to, go in have different groups of friends, they always fundamentally had those connections with the people that you ultimately spend most of your time with. And so that you want it to be a healthy relationship. You don't want to think that they're investing all of that time and it's not something that's supportive. But I think that one of the responsibilities we owe to our children is to ensure that environment is healthy and that all of the parents or majority are on the same page. We stressed academics, we stressed fun on the field, we stressed a time to be serious and accountability, and we talk about self-esteem and body issues, especially when I don't know if your children are male or female, but especially with girls in sports. And just it's great when when you're the star pitcher of your softball team. That's awesome in that setting, but then you get to high school and you're faced with bullying and maybe categorized as something that you're not, because there's so many stereotypes and kids like to hurt each other's feelings. So I think it's really important that we all be aware that there's, as wonderful as sports are, that sometimes it comes at a cost if you're not having those open dialogues with the parents and, teachers even, because they need to be involved as well. But
yeah, there's a funny movie out right now. I don't know how educational it is, but called Family, and it covers a little bit of neurotypical nature, both in adults and children, and gets into what's the real thread behind letting who you are shine,
right,
and what you love. And
I like it. I have to check it out.
Yeah, it's done in a sweet, funny way, and the parallels between us as adults and how we act in the workplace. So
touche.
Yes, right, exactly, with our coworkers, right? We
right.
just can't. Hey, I tell everybody in the county I joined Salad Club.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to be a member of the salad.
Be a part of it.
Be a part of a lunch group of somehow. It was all about inclusion in the Salad Club.
But it's important, and I think that's really funny. Because
nobody criticized my salad making skills.
Right. We learn that at such a young age of the importance of connectedness, whether we're able to verbalize it. And I think that genuinely spans across culture, across age group, across gender, but it's so important. But yeah, workplaces can also be very cliquish as well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned connectedness. I had a moment I want to mention where I got to go out and see the Reds play the Dodgers a few weeks ago, and it was like a 12 o'clock noon game,
Okay.
and I got to go to the stadium at like 10 a.m.
Nice.
And I followed our last guest's, KJ's advice, and I was really like, how amazing is this? And it came with parking. Like I've never, I used to walk across a bridge in New York to get to the game.
Wow.
Parking was like, miles
That's
away.
Everything.
Right? So I got parking like right up front in the stadium at 10 a.m.
Nice.
And there were only a few. There's no batting practice on day games. So there were only a few players out.
Okay.
And I got a chance just walking around, and I saw a gentleman wearing a Reds cap, and I said, hey, excuse me, are you connected to the Reds? He said, yeah, my son's one of the players.
Oh,
and
cool.
So Bill Hughes, I want to thank you for your conversation, and he took us he took us over. He took my son over to his son Jared Hughes, playing for the Reds right now, been in the majors about 6 years, and a graduate from Long Beach State.
Excellent.
And to see the connection that his father brought him over, and the way he was explaining the love of a sport to a young child, that to me, is the most beautiful aspect of and it's always my concern with professionals. Can they maintain, amidst the grind of what's become your profession and demand, can they maintain that authentic connection and presence in the moment? Where it's fun,
yes,
right? Where it's still fun. So thank you to you and the teen athletes out there, team moms out there who help keep it regulated, because having someone who's holding that space and creating a container, I think is really important in a lot of different, whether it be a therapeutic environment or a sports environment.
Absolutely.
You can see how important that is, that it's like, letting things, because things can go, there's all kinds of, like we said, home influences, social influences, and they can affect your school and your team as well.
Absolutely.
So
curveballs.
Yeah, so speaking on a little bit more somber note, your thoughts as a psychologist, both of us have worked with and around teens.
Yes.
The pressures from sports, the intensity, the head injuries.
Yes.
And some of the more frequent, including in this summer in Loma Linda School District, the kind of contagion of suicides.
Yeah.
What are you noticing, experiencing on that front?
Well, at that time, around the time of the suicides that happened, I was actually, I had taken a break from LA County and was working predominantly with children in the foster care system as I was getting my hours. And so that actually really impacted very hard, because not only is that area close to my home, I have children whose friends go to those high schools or have gone to those high schools, but also in the work environment that I saw a lot of county agencies coming together and really trying to create emergency treatment teams that were available to the high schools. And because it's tragic, any loss of life of a child is tragic, especially when it comes to suicide. And I think that what people were most frantic about is they couldn't understand, how so many suicides happened in such a short period of time. You have critics thinking, oh, it's a trend that children are, things become popular and, idealized, and you have that factor. It makes you question, well, what's going on in that particular community where there's a breakdown. And so those were all factors that as mental health professionals we came to the table to discuss. I actually had the pleasure of working with one young lady who went to Chino Hills High School and lost a really good friend to suicide. And she's a Girl Scout, and she was working on her merit badge. And she asked me to help her kind of get a panel discussion in order to earn this badge. And she was able to bring together Chino Hills city officials, law enforcement, different mental health counselors throughout San Bernardino County. And it was a program designed to, how do you have the talk about suicide? How do you talk to your child from a parent's perspective? How do you address the issue from a teacher's perspective? And what are some of the risk factors? Because it's so important. It's traditionally, as you know, suicide has always been thought of as taboo. If you and I are having this conversation, then there's a possibility now that I've planted a seed, and that, if you were in a suicidal, or even I was in a suicidal state, now my chances are more likely increased because we've had the conversation. But we both know statistically that that's not true. Studies have shown. So the question being, how did it impact? The most important thing that came out of it is that it started a lot of dialogues, and I think that that's what is important. That is what's needed, because it's tragic, but I also think that it's preventable, and it starts with having those dialogues and teaching people how to create a safe space where you can talk about your feelings, your whatever those feelings are, in a safe place, and not feel that you're going to be ridiculed or judged or anything else. But
so what have you found? How do we do that? Because that to me is the key piece, right? For any kind of traumatic or grief reaction, right? Especially after you've, I'm a grown adult with clinical PhD training and years of experience, but when I lost a friend to suicide a few years ago, there felt like,
sorry.
It was like a year-long grief. And
Absolutely.
And the real amazing, factor was that it pulled all of us as friends together. And I think we were closer almost for that year than we had been maybe ever. But how do we provide that kind of support? Because really the opposite of pain is connection.
Right.
So feeling like, you're right, the idea of self-harm, or when you're stuck in that place of pain and loneliness, it feels like the thoughts and emotions have to be kind of so painful for an extended period of time.
Absolutely.
And we know there have to be a range of factors, and maybe there is something to seeing somebody do it, and then you're there is a little bit of awareness that this is an option. So how do we brace against that, and how have you found that, especially for kids at risk in the foster system, how have you found, or for athletes, people who've been in a lot of pressure, a lot of physical abuse and punishment,
self-punishment, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the first step, honestly, is to listen. I think that children tell us a lot more than we're aware that they do if we are present in the moment and we're listening to what they're saying. I know that as much as I would say that being, team mom and carpooling my 7-passenger vehicle with all the kids in the back was a pain, but I would always listen to what they were saying, because it gave me a lot of insight to where they were, what was going on around them, who was an interest, who was possibly, if they were ganging up on people, because kids can be cruel, especially in packs. People can be cruel. But I think that that's fundamentally the most important, is listen to your child. But on the other end of that, that involves talking to your child, to your loved one, to anybody I think that you have a connection with, is to reach out and let them know that, hey, I've noticed maybe that you're changed a little bit. Maybe you're more withdrawn. Maybe someone school attendance isn't regular. Maybe you notice that they stop doing activities. They stop participating in sports. They stop laughing. They stop talking. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you have a quiet child by nature, and all of a sudden they're the star of the show, and and craving attention. I think that it's really important for us to notice those things, and when we do, to ask and say, hey, this is a safe place, and I noticed this. Is there anything you want to talk about? Good or bad, no judgment. I always told my kids that if they ever wanted to have a conversation, that they felt I made it known that they were in a safe place. They had no fear of punishment. They had no fear of judgment. And if they needed to talk to me, and they just needed to say, hey, fair space. And that's how we started it. And you realize that once you're having those conversations, you have them a lot more frequently, and it becomes where you don't even have to use a code word. It just becomes a part of your daily interactions. And I think that that's contagious, because you're now having those conversations in the car with other parents and children present, and hopefully they're taking that, into their home. And, hey, Mom, I saw so-and-so talk about this. And, I think that that's how we started.
Yeah, so now you're raising the parenting game, right? So and that's a big thing, in my role when I've served as coach, is number one, getting other parents to own that they're in relationship to the other kids, and to take an active role. But how do you address, you're talking about teenagers, right? So you're starting to talk about what's going on in school.
Mm-hmm.
Do they need to come to you about do you open the topic to everything? How do you know when to talk about things like mental health and suicide and drugs and alcohol? How do you know when it's time to pull the veil off and say?
Great question. And you don't. There is no aha moment where there is a perfect time. Conversations were not always easy. Sometimes conversations were awkward. I think that because I come from a psychology background and a natural curious background, I'm constantly watching everything. So whether it's something that's on television that there's a learning aha moment, I would bring that into the conversation. I'm also human too, and I make mistakes. And hey, you know what? I had a really hard day at work, and this is why, and I didn't feel like I did 100%, or my boss called me in and, I said I wasn't working to my full level. It's kind of having that transparency with your child. Obviously, depending on their maturity level, I'm of course not going to pull in my 5-year-old and tell them, my boss wrote me up. They're not gonna understand what that means unless, you can break it down to their level. But I think it's just being genuine and letting your children know that you're human, and reminding them, although they don't think so, that we were teenagers too. And not to say that times today aren't 100 times harder, especially with social media, but just allowing them to see that, hey, I've had to apologize. I make mistakes. I've struggled with depression. I've struggled with sadness. We lose people. We have pressures that they don't see. And I think that that's human. You have to be able to say, hey, everybody has feelings.
Well, that's really a key point there. The vulnerability, I think, is something that when I experience from a lot of my crisis evaluation trips, is that, people feeling at that level where they're thinking about harm is usually just such a pain from not being able to express or not being heard. there not being a safe place, not knowing where to turn,
Right.
not knowing where to express, and not being okay to be vulnerable. That
Right.
there's in fact a consequence
Very
or
important.
maybe a more authoritarian style going on,
Sure.
where no, you're not allowed to feel or think or any
Right.
of that. You need to just do,
Yeah.
and it's not so easy.
It's not.
To
And
just be performers, right?
exactly.
Even teenagers, expecting them just to perform, to be great students and great athletes, and
Right.
turn off everything else and not.
But be yourself. Right? Trying to enforce. We want them to be the best little humans, but at the same time, it's helping them find that balance of, be the best human for you versus the best human in my expectation. Yeah.
Exactly. So along the lines of, what about with concussions? Did you notice your experience with brain injuries, sports, how that's being handled, how that's any changes in how that's being addressed in mental health?
In mental health, it's really interesting because I actually just had this conversation on Friday with one of my colleagues, and we were just discussing how we are seeing young men, 22, 23, 24, coming in to the jail system, coming into the inpatient hospital setting with symptoms of dementia. And so digging further into that, we have found that oftentimes, they're football. I love football. So this is a real tough one for me because we know that concussions are serious, and we know that with any contact sport, especially like the footballs, the soccers, anything physical, it could be baseball too. They run at each other pretty hard, chasing the ball. So that there is the risk of serious trauma to the brain, and we're seeing that. I think that is the saddest thing because it's preventable. I don't know that in these specific situations that I talk about in the people that I've come across working in my field, if they had all of the proper equipment or if, I don't know all of that. But what I do know is that the last thing that you want to have to tell a parent is that your child is displaying signs of early dementia at 25. That's just devastating, but it's a very valid concern. And I know that they've made movies about it. One thing I did love about the NFL this year that I'm noticing more and more is that when somebody has a hard hit, they are really making all efforts to pull them out of the game. They take them away and scream. Yeah, right. But I don't think that they ever showed that as much as they did now. And I think it's important for players to realize that it's serious. I know that they were conditioned to get up and, I'm okay, coach, and possibly seeing, three-dimensionally and all kinds of things. So it's a very serious concern, especially with a son who played football since he was tiny to just played football for college, got a full scholarship,
Wow.
and is graduating this Friday. Yay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What school?
Dixie State in Utah.
Wow.
And so I know.
Vacation for mom?
Oh, most definitely for the whole family. But it's something that we have had heated discussions in our home because my boys are like, no, football, contact. But we have that dialogue to open, the understanding on both sides. Because
so speak more to that, because there's a lot of parents out there, right? Their kids are playing high school and they want to play collegiately, and that scholarship is amazing and leaves a lot of financial burden.
Absolutely.
And so how do you maintain that balance between absolutely supporting them, being great scholar athletes, at the same time monitoring these symptoms? What are some things you look for as a parent, and what are some things that coaches should be looking for?
That's a really great question. And I think that the beauty of our experience is that the coaches have really taken a personal interest in their players, and so their mental health, their education has become priority. And I think that when someone is injured, because I've seen a lot of torn ACLs and a lot of shoulder injuries and shoulder surgeries amongst my son and his teammates, is that coaches and parents reinforce it's okay to heal. I know it's disheartening because, it's kind of like a little loss of a dream when someone is injured or they think that their course or their plan may be derailed. But it's basically having those conversations, and it's hard, and it may require follow-up with like therapy or, seeing a professional to discuss those feelings if those conversations can't be held in the, between parent or in the home. But you really just have to talk to your child and, see where their head is at and let them know it's okay, that life is sometimes throws curveballs. That's what I always say.
So did you find did your son have any concussions?
He luckily didn't have any concussions, but he had a major shoulder issue that required surgery that we fought about for a solid 6 months because surgery was required. And he kept saying, no, I'm going to, go easy and ice it. And of course, but by this time he was 18, so it's not something that you can force, but it's something that you definitely have to keep reinforcing that life continues after football. And I still stress the importance that you need a functioning arm. So eventually there was an agreement, but it wasn't something that was immediate. And it really took bringing in the coach and saying, hey, I need your support here because I love football. We love football, but this is my baby.
Were they receptive? Were the coaches?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, because...
Did you know that before you chose the program?
Absolutely not. Uh-huh. I didn't. But I know that my son followed a couple of other teammates that came from the same junior college. And so there was good rapport between their junior college coach and the coach that they went to play with. So that was a good safety network that we felt comfortable with.
So that's a good sign for a parent, right?
Yeah.
The coach is receptive.
Absolutely.
To parent input, even if they're no longer a minor.
Yeah.
They can still receive your concerns and address it.
Absolutely. It is important because as much as we love sports, sometimes plans change. Even, just as professionals, sometimes plans change. And a part of life is learning how to cope with those times that aren't always the easiest.
Yeah, and it's a difficult thing for me to see, in a role working with teams, is that, sometimes you see something that's a concern. And you're concerned about whether it just be strained tendons or a developmental issue with younger adults or something emotional, and you're not quite sure where it's coming from.
Right.
And there's a selfish aspect of like, well, as long as he shows up and performs on the team, but it's like you said, that watchful eye of kind of taking a look at it and saying, well, is there something more here that's needed? Is there kind of a cry for help going on?
Right.
Is there a one-on-one, something that is trying to be expressed that has not been
sure, and it's not easy.
Needs professional attention outside of the team environment.
Right.
Needs further medical or psychological support. So any signs you want to hand out for parents if they're noticing depression or mood change, anything that might be risk factors for
separate from teenage mood swings?
Yeah, exactly. Well, great question.
Yeah.
Right? How do you tell the difference, right?
You know what? It's really important, a really important question, and I honestly believe that sometimes it's the most subtle things. It could be a change in sleeping patterns, a change in eating patterns. For my a big one is just a change in interest. A child who loves to go to school, who no longer cares about being there on time, or no longer cares if you need to check them out because they have a doctor's appointment, where once they were like, oh no, I can't miss this, spelling test. It's small things like that. It's also a change in the mood, like withdrawing, just a quiet withdrawal. Sometimes what I realize that a person can be right next to you and be very silent and maybe feel completely alone, still interacting with you on a like superficial level. But if you're not present and looking at them and watching their body language and, checking on them, hey, how was your day? I know that sounds like really corny and cliche, but how was your day? What'd you do today? What was great about your day? What sucked about your day? Because all of those questions are relevant.
Well, I like how you said it's not just the words or the questions, it's also a level of attunement.
Yeah.
And paying attention to things like eye contact. You mentioned, depression and some of the kind of more emotional withdrawn symptoms. Don't forget that some of the other symptoms are needing to be perfect, needing to always be the best student.
The self-pressure.
Nowadays with social media, you can see what every single one of your teammates is doing, how many times they practice a week. You can see
their body fat percentage,
all
that is right.
All that
it's
information.
On display,
in
sure.
fact, I was told that even now in scouting, they can tell in scouting in terms of your mechanics. There's projections on entire workouts you'll be projected to do at the next level or capability. So
yikes.
So that level, right, and this is the advantages of AI and technology, is also pushing a level of extremism in sports and intensity, which, as coaches, as team moms out there, as parents who drive the team wagon, if you've got a battered minivan out there, right? Like, you have an important role in this resiliency and kind of moderating the pressures. The pressures are only going to intensify. Even the founder of PayPal, I think it's Peter Thiel, in his book Zero to None, which I've just completed. Thanks for recommendation, Aaron Samsky. If you want a book recommendation, hit up the real Aaron Samsky on Instagram. But he talks about this computerization, and robot and intelligence things and apps. Right, we're all using them. Every sports psychologist or even team has their own apps now for mindfulness, meditation, but also tracking their workouts and performance, and it's amazing.
Right.
But with athletes, we have to look for a whole nother set of symptoms, right? If
Absolutely.
You're just pushing yourself way past the level where you're, using exercise to cover up anxiety and depression.
Most definitely.
So if you're a teammate, if you're a coach and you notice someone who's just maybe trying to fill a certain kind of emotional pain, and we're all motivated by where we've come from and what we're working towards, but if it feels out of balance, just to be able to be that friend who gets a bite to eat with them, or does something leisurely that balances out in a healthy way, being normal, even dare I say, getting into a video game, whatever it is, right?
Be
right?
silly.
It's okay.
Yes.
If that's your silly, if that's your play, you need to play. You need to
Yes.
be normal teenagers, adolescents, adults. It can't be all work, all future oriented, because then you're not living in the now, you're not living in your body, and you're setting yourself up for also how we're going to live as adults. So
exactly.
Easy for us to say once we've gotten on the other side of the couch or lectern, but really this is an influence, this is an awareness you carry when we're pushing our kids from like activity to activity, or always thinking about what's going to happen next, which college you're getting into, things of that nature. So I thank you, Dr. Shaw, for bringing up, it's not a fun topic. We hope we didn't lose listeners when we mention suicidality,
Sure.
but it is also important that we pierce the veil and notice trends and talk about what we're seeing. I know that almost every team I see, even in affluent areas, there are 1, 2, 3 kids where there's a parent with a mental health issue.
Most
There's a
definitely.
kid who's perhaps in a custody issue. There are kids out there that just that invitation to come over, play, have a pizza party,
could make the whole
you can
difference
change
in
their
life.
As somebody who hopped to all my friends' houses until I made them my family, and I didn't have to, but I thank all those parents, and to this day I still consider them family. So thank you so much.
Awesome.
And so in closing, Dr. Shaw, thank you for being here.
Thank you
For the work you do, and for continuing to be a resilient source for your grown children. We wish you success at the
Thank you very
graduation.
much.
I hope you have some fun out in Utah.
Absolutely.
How can people get a hold of you if you want them to contact you, or any closing thoughts?
I hadn't even thought of that. That's a really good question. I don't know.
Okay, you could share it later if you want.
I will definitely have to. But closing remarks, just you mentioned a lot of, self-pressure. And I think that as parents, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as well to try to be the perfect parent. And again, I stress it's okay with letting your child, everybody around you know that you are human too, and we make mistakes and we need help, and it's okay to be vulnerable. And I love what you said about our children recognizing that in their own friends, because it's so important, because we are all here together. And thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely. And thank you for being a resource to the jail population.
Thank
a lot
you.
of forgotten souls.
Yeah.
You're getting people, unfortunately, after they've gone through quite a bit, and even if they, some people, yes, they're deserving to be there, they've broken the law, but others, a lot of untreated mental illness.
Absolutely.
But thank you for mentioning vulnerability, and thank you for mentioning the power of parenting and allowing, whether it's your friends or children or athletes on your teams, allowing them to be the authentic version of themselves, allowing them to express that unique ability, learning to appreciate their character and their voice within. May we all be better at that this week.
Yes.
And may we all encourage each other to step up, participate, and be the best versions of ourselves, whether we be needing more self-care or more attunement, as Dr. Shaw brought us in. Thank you again. Once again, please look for All Access Broadcasting, AAB Network, on Spotify, iTunes, and Twitter, and look for the Richard Listens Show. Please subscribe, share them with your auntie, your friend, your coach, your teammate. Tell them, hey, you should listen to the show, and we love it. Thank you for all the follows and shares, and stay tuned. In 2 weeks, we'll be back, and we will have on May the 6th, I believe, Monday, Dr. Andrew Sarowitz. And yes, I was his camp counselor. You get to hear some dirt on me, and you get to learn a little bit about Brooklyn Nets, MMA, and what kind of dental problems he solves and all this, and how he found himself in this situation. So that's it for us today. Thank you for tuning in. Take care, everybody. We're out.